When I was scrolling down my timeline in Facebook, I saw a post where someone asked, is there a good alternative for Serum? And of course, a lot of people have said Vital, which I find very reasonable, as the synths are like, Vital is very inspired by Serum. I know, plugin developers are usually like, no, I'm not inspired by that plugin. This is my totally unique creation. But I think it is okay to say, even for the developer of Vital, that there was a lot of inspiration from Serum. Even though it totally is a unique synthesizer and has its own features. And it doesn't need to just to be seen as a copy of Serum. And that's also the reason why a lot of people have even claimed that Vital is much better than Serum. And while I wouldn't disagree that it's much better in a lot of senses, I would say that Serum is also much better in some ways. And in the end, I think it actually cancels out. Both synthesizers have their places in certain situations. So I wrote that as a comment, and then someone challenged me and said, yeah, if that is the case, then tell me 5 things that you like more about Serum than Vital. So I made a list with 5 things, and in this video we are going to explore them. Okay, so the context of this video is a little beat that I made, where I have a kick drum with a preset from Chop Suey by Dorsum. Then there is an instance of Serum that plays a bass line that is very creative. And then there is also an instance of Vital that plays the same very creative bass line. The sounds are a little bit different, but that shouldn't matter too much. Okay, now let's get into it. Envelope scaling. Let's say that you have an envelope like this one. And you turn down the release because it's a bass line. And now you want to actually be able to clearly visualize what's going on with the skew factor of the release. Yeah, you can still grab it, so that kind of solved the issue. Because in Serum, if this was like this tight, then you wouldn't see it anymore. And even in Vital, this moment can appear at some point. And it kind of depends on the zoom factor as well. So if the release really is at the verge of disappearing, the release skew, then you have to turn down the zoom factor. And what I also always do is turning off any decay, so that you know it's very clear to the visible eye that this sound has nothing to do with decaying or even sustain. It's just default 0 and 1. And now, since I zoomed in fully, I can tweak the release better. Maybe I could even use an oscilloscope to check out what it does. Cool. Now let's see the same workflow in Serum. In Serum, the default state of the envelope is this. And you can see when the release is turned down a lot, then you can't see that handle anymore. Similar to how it's handled in Vital, and you can use the zoom factor to get that back. But what I always like to do even more is actually turning on relative scale, or it's called auto zoom switch, apparently. Now, the envelope is always kind of scaled to the size of this visual component. Even if you use very long decay and release, it will always show it in relation to the size of the window. So you can just tweak the release, and as long as you don't go below a certain value, apparently, it will always just go all over the whole window. And lets you tweak this curve even nicer. Now you can even experiment with dialing in some attack, and you totally know that the release point will not go out of bounds. Easy. So that's one thing that I like more in Serum than in Vital. Next up is the Wavetable editor. Let's make a new wave so that we don't have to mess up the old one. And now open the Wavetable editor. What can we do here? These points do something when I hover over them. So that kind of shows that you can do things here. But it's not entirely clear what these things are. It's kind of weird. Something with the grid. Of course, there is a grid in Serum too, but what exactly can you do here? Okay, you can draw a shape somehow. But it's all just triangular shapes, if I'm correct. Flip, vertical, okay, that's just the whole thing. So basically, drawing waveforms is kind of limited if I'm seeing that correctly. I'm also trying to hold down Alt in order to find if there are some other draw modes also, but what would make even more sense if some of this UI was used to give you some tools, like different drawing tools. And then there is some options for saving or loading the wavetable as wave file and stuff. So some, convenient preset browserish features. And yeah, some other modes, but I don't really get what they change. So yeah, I would have to watch a tutorial on this to understand it, and I didn't do that. Now there's also this thing that we know from Serum where you can draw the individual harmonics and their relationship to each other. Let's say we have a wave like this. Can we somehow like normalize it or remove the DC offset? I don't know. And then there is like these thingies that kind of remind of video editors. This is how automation looks in video editors. Now, okay, that's how you make it move to a different wavetable position. And I like about this that it automatically creates all the different wavetables in between. Not like in Serum where you have to handle all the individual wavetables manually, all the 256 ones, even though most of the time you just set a start point and an end point and then call it a day with the spectral wavetable making thingy. But there are also different modes, so you can get pretty in depth with all this stuff if you have enough time on your hands. And sound designers are known to have that. So yeah. So you have some basic effects on your hands that can really help making some interesting stuff with the Wavetable editor. But it's not a lot of them, and yeah, and there is no post-processing of the Wavetable in this upper menu, so that it's not a lot to do. And also I was never a fan of drawing the harmonics manually. That's not very interesting in my opinion. Even the phase shift thing, like as if I have the time to draw a manual configuration of all the phase shifts here. So this modulator is basically just a gimmick to me. So yeah, what is the sound that I came up with? At least it's nice. Cool. Let's just take this. Now going to Serum. If we go into the Wavetable editor of Serum, then we also have this thing where we can draw the individual harmonics. And it's just as ridiculous as it is in Vital, with a lot of these bars that you probably never touch. Then there is also the drawing thing, where you can also set a grid for drawing stuff and then draw stuff in it. But other than Vital, it gives you these different shapes as tools, so you can actually make different shapes if you want to do that. I am personally also not a fan of that kind of stuff, but I gotta say, at least you can like do all this kind of stuff, you know, post-processing the whole wavetable, or morph the tables in different ways, or do other processing like removing some of the stuff. And I don't want to go into depth too much on that, because that can fill multiple hours. But I will just show you different examples of what you can do with that. For example, you could make a recording of your voice. La. And then you could use a vocoder on that to tune that to a certain note. I will just choose the same note as the bass line. Bit speak. And then I render that to a new track. Now I know that this is a G0 note, so I can type in G0 into the Formularparser of Serum, and now Serum expects something that has this note, and I can drag it in and it will load the sample at G0. Now I have this vocal sample in Serum. And now I can actually go ahead and, you know, round off this wavetable. For example, it currently only consists of 9 waves. So I just say, okay, I want to remove DC offset of all of the tables. I want to normalize all of them individually. And now I want to morph them in a cool way, which I usually find Spectral to be best. Another thing that you can do with the Formularparser is actually typing in whole formulas of things that should happen over time in your wavetable. So let me put this LFO to the wavetable position of the second oscillator. And now I will let it move through the whole wavetable like that, while saying cosinus of x times z times 16 plus 1 actually +2. Now I made a totally unique wavetable that has a mathematical shape. So basically what I want to say is I'm a huge fan of the Formularparser and of the Wavetable editor in general. And when it comes to the Wavetable editor in general, then I'm a huge fan of these menus where you can do a lot of stuff with the wavetables, and most of that stuff I haven't even covered in this video because, as I said, that would be just way too much. But yeah, that is how you can work out some seriously interesting stuff in Serum. And yeah, Vital has a nice wavetable editor as well, but it lacks a lot of features. Now the next thing I want to talk about are the built-in effects. A lot of these plugins, like Vital and Serum, they kind of live off the fact that there are built-in effect chains. Because then you have the advantage that you can use your modulation system with the built-in effects, and they will just have direct influence on all of the internal stuff without having to deal with, you know, parameter smoothing and stuff like that, which is a problem that you have to deal with when using the modulators of Bitwig on plugin parameters, like the ADSR, for example. The ADSR modulator, and it could be attached to certain parameters of the synthesizer, but that would always be a little bit imprecise because of parameter smoothing and the inability of plugins to update the parameter value on a sample basis. So you don't have this disadvantage with the built-in plugin effects, and that's the reason why you usually have an effects chain. Now let's try that with the reverb, for example. And you hear the size parameter of the reverb built into Vital does not allow smooth parameter changes. It sounds crackly and discontinuous because for some reason the developer did not think that this parameter could be modulated by anyone. So you can't actually do that except if you want such a sound. Well, on this particular sound, it actually sounds pretty cool. I found that the reverb doesn't sound very nice to me on a lot of other types of material, but in this case it sounded pretty cool. Usually I'm also not a fan of some of the other modulation plugins, like effects like the Chorus one. Yeah, still not a fan of that. Now let's compare this with Serum. The reverb in Serum sounds huge, especially the played one. I really like it. It always works, even on a bass line like this. So yeah, in this case I found the reverb of Vital a little bit cooler, but that is just a little bit different from situation to situation. But what I really want to show you is the chorus effect. Instead of giving you a high pass filter, they give you a band pass filter. So you can just say which frequency is this chorus instead of what is the workflow of a high pass filter. I don't know. The workflow of a high pass filter, the idea of a high pass filter in a chorus is more like, I don't want it to affect the low end, but it should affect the rest of the signal. But I find myself more often just wanting it on a specific frequency, and neither on the low end nor on the high end, but just on some frequency where it really works. And that's the workflow of Serum's chorus effect. So as you have heard, the size parameter in the reverb of Serum can actually be modulated well if you don't overdo it. So there is definitely some parameter smoothing going on in there. So Steve Duda really thought about the case where you just want to modulate any parameter in the plugin. And that is also the reason why this modulation system and this effects section exists. And that's, you know, one of the reasons why Vital is sort of a copy of Serum, because Serum, as the synthesizer this was inspired from, was very well thought through in every detail. And you know, Steve Duda made a lot of design decisions that were just based on common sense, because Steve Duda just thought of all of these things and reiterated them a lot. And while I wouldn't say that the developer of Vital didn't put a lot of thought into it, some of the basic features or the layout of the plugin that, you know, the part of Vital that is inspired by Serum, it didn't have this depth of thought in it as Serum itself has. Because that was the part that is just a copy of Serum, and then there is the cool new stuff stacked on top. And that's one of the examples where you can actually see that in action, this difference. The next thing that I initially wanted to talk about is the Formularparser. The Formularparser, I have already used it to show you how versatile the Wavetable editor in general is. So I will not start again and show that again. I will just go a little bit on with this concept and show you that there are some presets about the Formularparser that have some interesting use cases. And yeah, what's interesting here is that some of these presets are also made to not, they neither are made to import samples nor to create wavetables, but to process them just like the process menu here. So you can actually type in formulas that change the existing wavetable in a mathy way. That's actually something I haven't dived into yet a lot, but it's already just really cool to make different wavetables with this. As you can see, there are even some user singles and user multis. This is essentially two different files where you can write in your own formulas when you have come up with something cool, and then it will just be here available as a preset. And the reason why I love the Formularparser so much is because it's a unique feature that is actually giving you a new workflow. There is only one other plugin that I know that has a really cool Formularparser. Not actually true, I know another plugin, but this is actually one that I use a lot. And in this case, the Formularparser is meant to create a wave shaper distortion transfer curve that is, yeah, then used for distortion purposes. And I think that's just a really cool feature to just let you use math in a creative way, where you don't always have to know the outcome and you can just do something funky with it. For example, if I were to do this, just put a cosinus wave in here, and then maybe do this a little bit because I have an A parameter. And this is a transfer curve that is pretty unique. You will not get that in a different distortion plugin usually, because you know, the plugin developers who make distortion plugins, they usually carefully select only the wave shapes that they really like most, and then they give you the plugin where you can access these wave shapes. But with something like FunkShaper, you can just make your own wave shapes, and that's often really cool. And yeah, that's just another example of an incredible use case of a Formularparser that is a lot of fun to use. And the one in Serum is even more versatile with all this 3D stuff. Yeah, you don't need to be a math pro in order to use it. You can just slap in different functions and directly listen to how it sounds and evaluate how much you like it from that. And that is just a feature that I would wish to see in more synthesizers. The next thing on my list is the existence of infinite LFOs. In Serum, if you have maxed out the amount of LFOs, you can just use even more. To be honest, that is not a feature that I use a lot, because I usually try to, you know, just get things done with as few modulators as possible in order to keep it more tidy, and you know, that I can have a nice overview about the patch. But it's a feature that exists, so it should be mentioned as well. Now I'm sure that I forgot about a lot of things that are also very cool in Serum that are not available in Vital, and if you know some of them, just let me know in the comments, me and everyone else who watches this video of course, and then you can engage in conversation about it maybe. Now let's actually go on with the top 5 of the features that I like more in Vital than in Serum, so that this is fair video. First of all, and you know, the most important and most incredible feature of Vital is not even a technical feature, but it's just the fact that it's free. Well, you have to pay quite a lot of money to buy Serum, and yeah, there are models where you can pay it in small rates every month, and that's really cool because you also own it at the end. It's not a dumb subscription service, but it definitely costs money, and not just a bit. And Vital is completely free, so that's why I would say you should totally get Vital. And then the only question is, should you also get Serum? And my answer to that is, I don't know, that is up to you. Thing is just that most synthesizers of this amount of features and size and usability cost money. So you can't just say, oh, just because Vital is free, now everything should be free, that is just that cool. That is not how it works. A lot of VST developers want to make money in different ways. For example, Vital makes a lot of money by selling you preset packs. You can check out different authors, and yeah, I don't want to click on their names now because that would like remove the patch that I made, but you could do that, and then with the inspector view you could get a link to the page on Vital's website where you can buy more from that artist. And that's the way how Vital makes money, and that's why they can release the synthesizer for free. But a lot of developers don't want to make such a sophisticated system for making money. They just want to sell the thing to you, and then you have it, and that's it. And that's very reasonable because it's very hard to set up such an online connection with a plugin. You know, that's really not trivial. So you can expect everyone to do that. And yeah, so basically what I want to say is Vital is not really free. It just is pretty free, and it has a different pricing model than Serum. And in the end, it can turn out that you spend the same amount on both synthesizers if you are a fan of presets and stuff. Now the next thing that I want to talk about are the spectral features, because in Serum you are kind of limited to some of the basic wavetable editing warp modes. It's called warp modes in here, like sync windowed, band minus, band plus minus, PWM, which is very useful for square waves, asymmetrical warp, other asymmetrical warp, asymmetrical in both directions, flip, which is also very useful on very simple wave shapes like saw waves, mirror, which has a very pleasant sound, like sounds a bit like a spring, and a cool remap curve where you can just draw your own remap behavior, which is totally insane in my opinion. This feature is really cool. Quantize, FM from the other oscillator, and yeah, that's basically it. So in Vital you have all of these functions too, or like a lot of them, like for example bend. Well, not all of them. It's kind of reduced to what is used most, except for PWM. I think PWM is actually missing here. That's weird. But anyway, the cool thing here is this other knob that like gives you some very crazy control about the sound. You know, it can sound like this. So yeah, that's also the reason why there are 3 different modes to look at the waveform here, because this is actually not just a time domain waveform, but more like a spectral wavetable where you can have spectral features to tweak. And these are like very well tuned spectral features. I could imagine at some point, maybe it would be cool if there were even more of these in the plugin, because this feature is just so nice. That's what I like about Vital a lot. Oftentimes you can come up with a combination of oscillators and their spectral editing thingies with some modulators, and it sounds cool even before you start to make your first filter modulation, which is incredible in my opinion. Now the next thing that I want to talk about is the Unison. In Serum you can dial in some Unison. But in order to use some of the more advanced Unison features, you have to go to the Global tab. So yeah, that is not like optimal, and in Vital you can tweak that right on the oscillator itself, and I think there is there are actually additional features in the advanced tab. So you still have to go to the advanced tab to do some of the advanced stuff like table spread. Okay, there is no dist at the moment, so that doesn't do anything. But yeah, there is some things that you have to go to the different tab for. But like, I think the overall Unison workflow is a little bit better here. Especially that you can do this distribution between the voices thingy right on the oscillator, because that's actually something, when I dial in Unison on Serum, the first thing I always do is changing the distribution to whatever I desire, because that has a big impact. So it makes sense to actually have this feature on the main page, in my opinion. Now the next thing that I want to talk about is the vocal synthesis feature, where you can right click on an oscillator and say text to wavetable and type in something cool like wow. And then it will make a cool little patch for you that says that word. And if you wanted to, you could just play it back the way it is. So yeah, vocal synthesis, very useful because you immediately get something that sounds a little bit organic and you can work with it. You don't have to even open the Wavetable editor to make a complex wavetable, and also not the preset browser, which I always like a lot because I like to make my own stuff, but it should still be easy. Now the next thing I want to talk about, which I really like in Vital, and I haven't even checked it out to the core yet, but I saw a video where it was used in a very cool way, is the remapping of modulations. Now one thing that you already know from Serum itself is that you can skew the modulation. And therefore make some of the things a little bit smoother. But you can also just change the whole mapping in a much more wild way. So yeah, it is basically just a way for you to say, yeah, I got a modulation shape already, but the modulation shape is assigned to multiple parameters and I want each of the parameters to have their own little twist of this modulation shape. And I think that in a lot of cases that makes much more sense than just having a lot of different LFOs. Because you don't often just want to have infinite LFOs, you much more often want to have something like one LFO and a bit of variations of that LFO going on. That is just solved in a masterful way with this modulation remapping feature. Now let's play both together. And as you can hear, they work together very well. You can just have Serum and Vital together and they will both contribute in their ways to the overall sound. And that's like the point of this video, to show you that there is no point in over-obsessing about any synthesizer, even if it has some new features that are definitely very cool. You can just still use an older synthesizer and enjoy it just as much with its own special strengths. And now you can still decide for yourself if you like Vital more than Serum, or maybe even Serum more than Vital. But the fact is just that it's all subjective and that we cannot just say something is generally better than the other thing. And that's like the point of this video.